Are you tired of the same old streaming options? Introducing Myco, the revolutionary Web3 content platform where you can not only watch films, TV shows, user-generated content, live events, and listen to podcasts, but earn from them too. Myco commissions and produces content that connects and empowers both viewers and creators in a fully decentralized video ecosystem. With live monetization, crowdfunding, NFT gating, and even the opportunity for fractional ownership of content, Myco is changing the game. Myco, join the conversation and start earning today. Download the app from the Apple and Google Play app stores.
TellyCast.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to another TellyCast. This week, I'm here in Austin, Texas, for the 25th anniversary Realscreen Summit, where factual producers, distributors, networks, and agents have all come together for the first January edition of the global market and conference for 3 years. My guests on this week's show are Evan Shapiro, All3 Media's Rachel Job, Deadline's TV editor Peter White, and Marc Kamler, partner and head of unscripted content at A3 Artists Agency. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. My first guest this week is producer and media cartographer Evan Shapiro. Evan, great to meet you in person finally.
Good to meet you too.
Welcome back to TellyCast, Evan. We obviously spoke about, I think this might have been 18 months ago or maybe a year or so ago, and we were talking about various different things that you've been doing, which, is, I think, has been hugely influential within social media circuits, within the business of TV, all the future gazing stuff you've been doing and the media maps which have been developing and looking at the future of media as a whole. So we'll come on to talk maybe a little bit about that in a second. So some context. We're here at an Unscripted event, Market and Summit. We're in January. Last year was pretty turbulent, I think. A lot of M&A activity happening right across the industry. How do you see this year panning out, specifically in the sort of more traditional linear and digital unscripted sector? How do you see things panning out right now?
It's going to be an interesting year. I mean, especially with regards to M&A, I do think you'll see more of it this year. There is a major challenge that most of the companies are having. So you have the audiences leaving traditional pay TV and linear dramatically. So we're now at 40% of all viewing is streaming. So you have this, shrinking universe of audience and dollars in the traditional pay TV ecosystem. At the same time, those viewers are going to some combination of SVOD, AVOD, FAST. But what the direct-to-consumer folks, especially the Netflixes and the HBO Maxes and the Paramounts and the like, are finding is that serial churning has become the new channel changing. I just released a study of 27,000 different media consumers this week. It's a big sample. When we ask them, what do you intend to do with your subscriptions in the year ahead, just 7% say they're going to keep the subscriptions they currently have.
7%.
7%. So that means 93%. Doesn't mean 93% are going to cancel every month. But what it does mean is that 93% of all media subscribers are going to consider canceling one or more of their services every single month. And this is across video and audio and gaming as well. But, especially when you look at these SVOD services and you can see the churn rising on Netflix. And in fact, when you look at the churn across almost all of the services, it's all up. Across the industry, churn is now around 6, 7, 8% on average, depending on, the month. Keeping subscribers at home is going to be a major challenge for all these players who got into this space. And by the way, that's not just for the paid services. The free services, it's not necessarily the same kind of churn, but it is channel changing kind of in the old school. So there's so much content out there. We've created this enormous corn maze of really good programming, right? And one of the problems I think the industry, loves to talk about, but then never solves is discovery. It's very difficult to find the content and know where it is, and everything's a walled garden, et cetera, et cetera. But the consumers are finding it. What they're finding is they have this wonderful power of being able to switch out whatever isn't working for them on a month-to-month basis. So that is going to be the driving force. The fact that 93% of all media users and subscribers are at play every single month is not something that I think everybody in our ecosystem calculated when they got into the direct-to-consumer business. If you're direct-to-consumer, then you're responsible now for the retention, remarketing, and acquiring of those subscribers every month. It's like being a mailman.
Do you think that a lot of the big media companies that thought moving into direct-to-consumer just figured that their library and their new original content was purely enough to actually attract new subscribers and retain them? Do you think that was maybe that's perhaps a little arrogant, in terms of the way of the process, or maybe naive, or maybe a bit of both?
I think it's a misunderstanding of the new market. So that did work in the traditional ecosystem because you were part of a larger bundle. Even the HBO, which was sold separately, you were still part of a big bundle. And so the consumer really had to work hard to cancel anything on a monthly basis. I mean, if you've ever tried to cancel your cable bill or even just change the tiers that you're on in your pay TV ecosystem. Now we're talking about mostly America here because this is a squarely North American issue. It's far less a thing in Europe where it's a different set of problems.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to keep consumers. First of all, none of them were responsible for the acquisition and retention of those subscribers. That was entirely the problem of the cable operator, the end provider, if you will, which was also being bundled into broadband, phone, and telephone. So you had two different bundles basically acting as the glue of the relationship with the consumer.
That was the triple play, which we're looking at. What was that, about 10 years ago or so? It was maybe at its height, maybe a bit longer than that, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's really peaked in the last, you would say in the last 5 years, the triple play is starting to really age badly. And one of the reasons is in the middle of last year, we hit peak broadband in the United States. Broadband is not expanding anymore. And it may even start to contract. And part of that is 5G getting better and better. Part of that is, people can get broadband at their school or their office and download what they need and then watch it later. So the pay TV bundle, the bundle of video that we pay for, that's disintegrating very quickly, more quickly every month. And then you have the triple play, which is the underlying kind of foundation of the economics of the pay TV ecosystem in the United States. That is also beginning to disintegrate. The number one canceling subscriber in the United States is the triple play subscriber, the most valuable, the most profitable subscriber out there. And so, now that it's much easier to sell orange juice in someone else's store than on a stand at the corner. Right? Because no one just heads out and says, you know what I need today? Just some orange juice. No, they go to the grocery store and they get eggs and milk and cheese and orange juice. So I don't think that, and I knew this was happening when Disney launched, in 2019, that I actually wrote something about it saying, I don't think you're prepared for the change in business model that's ahead. The idea that you're now standing alone, naked in the world. And what happened was COVID and lockdown fooled everybody into thinking, well, this is going to be easy because everybody was subscribing to everything. Because what the fuck else were you going to do? You had nothing else to do. Now what's happening, and this survey that I did with Publishers Clearinghouse very clearly dictates this. They're like, oh, wait, I oversubscribed. And now I'm month to month. And it's because it's so easy. I can just go click, 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 and just change out my subscription package. The number one category in the United States, according to this survey, of people who say they're going to swap out every month is $75,000 to $150,000 household income. This is the kind of classic home that way oversubscribed.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I haven't used that this month. Why am I subscribing to this? And Netflix is now falling prey to this. The one service that nobody ever canceled is now finding out, hey, we are cancelable too. And in fact, it's happening at a rapid rate for them.
And obviously they brought in their ad tier recently, which is something they always said they would never do. How effective do you think that cheaper ad tier will be for them?
I think it will eventually be a very good product. It's a piece of crap right now. Most of their content isn't in it. It's the worst offering for consumers as far as.
And this is because of rights, presumably, and all the rights that they've got to go back to renegotiate the rights for all the content that they have, and the whole new model. And that's going to take time, isn't it?
Yeah, and the evidence is there. No one's signing up for it. And that means no one's using it. That means the impressions aren't there. And they had to turn back a whole bunch of money in fourth quarter as a result of that. And now they'll tell you that it's going really well. It's not. It's not going really well. The consumer doesn't want to watch it because it's not all the best content that you go to Netflix for. So they're just signing up for the paid tier and churning out after they're done binging. The highest month of churn, the highest month of cancellation in the history of Netflix was this July when they had Stranger Things drop.
Right.
People came in, watched the heck out of it in a weekend, and then canceled. And that is the classic problem that all of these services are going to face right now. Now, I think Netflix will fix that ad product. They will get the rights that they need. They will offer a better product. And I imagine it will happen in this year. Then you go to the other issue, which is I don't think that's going to be enough for anybody. I don't think it's going to be enough for Paramount. I don't think it's going to be enough for Disco Brothers. I don't think it's going to be enough for Peacock. I think that when you look at the true competition these companies face, it's Apple and Amazon, who offer gaming, audio, cloud, and devices as all part of one package. That's the new triple play. That's what we need. Consumers want that. They don't want to buy an egg. They want to buy a package of services and know that they're at least getting some efficiency out of it. And so when you look at Amazon Prime, who raised prices the same month Netflix did last year and didn't see an appreciable churn, and you look at what Apple is building in a combination of Apple Music, Apple TV, Apple Arcade, cloud services, and you'll get it all free with your new iPhone 27. That's the new playing ground. That is the new field. And you can make your ad product really great on Netflix. You can put out 10 Euphorias on HBO Max. At the end of the day, unless you offer some other scratches for some other itches, it's going to be very difficult to keep. Subscribers will come in, they will watch the heck out of something, and then they will leave.
A lot of what you've spoken about in the past is about this bundling. So the new play, following your train of thought and your grocery store analogy, is that bundling now has got to be a key priority, you would have thought, for a lot of these media businesses. So does that mean acquisition? Does that mean acquisition by Microsoft, by Apple, by the tech giants? Does that make that more inevitable than ever? And do we think that this year we'll see the some of those big deals going through?
I don't know. I mean, part of it is regulatory. So some of these companies aren't going to be allowed to buy anything because, the regulators and Congress don't like them very much right now. It's very popular to run against big tech. So we'll see. But I would hope more people think about bundling services. I mean, the lowest churn in the industry right now is the Disney bundle, and that's not a cross-media bundle, but it is a cross-genre bundle. So you've got Disney Plus, Hulu, which has one of the best VMVPDs out there in Hulu Live, and you have ESPN Plus. So that when you bundle those three together, the churn halves any of the individual services themselves. Now imagine if they added Spotify to that.
Yeah.
Imagine if it came with extra R-Bucks in Roblox. That's what people should be doing right now. They should be looking for lifestyle activities that their users do as well. So, and by the way, the Paramount Plus Walmart bundle, that's a good idea. More, please. And you don't have to acquire someone to create a bundle with them, but I think it's going to ultimately get into the acquisition game. So I think Disney should buy Spotify. And if Disney doesn't, I think HBO Max should. And if they don't, I think Paramount should. Or merge. Because Spotify, A, has the lowest churn in all of media. And 2, is in real trouble. They're in real trouble. They just laid off people today. They've never been profitable. So they need an exit. Peloton, think about this for a second. If Netflix came in a bundle with Peloton and the New York Times, would you ever break up with it?
No.
That's where we're headed. And I know it sounds weird, but so does having broadband and Euphoria and SpongeBob bundled together. Do you mean Yeah, theoretically and scientifically, it makes a whole lot of sense to have your phone bill and your subscription to Yellowstone bundled in the same thing. But kind of metaphysically, it makes no sense whatsoever. However, it works. The more certain, this is not a new idea. I learned this from Tom Rutledge at Cablevision. The more services you sell to the home, the harder it is for them to break up with you, which is why Prime membership is an unbreakable bond no matter what they charge for.
I think for a lot of people in the more traditional end of the TV industry, always thought, I don't get the thing with, Prime and the groceries and, how it's kind of weird how it fits together. But now we're seeing, how strong that is and what a fantastic strategy that was. So we're looking at obviously lots of M&A. We're in the middle of a global recession, so it's going to be tough times. But moving on from media plays and M&A, we were talking just before we recorded this about content, and we were talking, and here we are at a Unscripted event, and you were talking a little bit about sort of campaigning that you're doing for a different kind of content for media businesses to perhaps be a little bit more inspirational in terms of the content they're acquiring and commissioning. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so, we have this fascination with dark. I believe that the television community has kind of confused intelligence with darkness, and that they mean the same thing, or anger sells. So look at the Real Housewives franchise. So we are awash in negativity, and I'm not sitting here saying don't make, dark stuff. I love dark stuff, but the most popular content and most of the content now, no one's even making comedies anymore unless it's a dramedy. And I look back to a show like Star Trek, which is not a reality show, or An American Family, 1973, where the first real gay character ever appeared on American screens, right? Or the non kind of cliche version of filmdom. And both of those shows open people's eyes in a really important way. Now, granted, the American Family was about a family falling apart and divorce, and Star Trek had war in it. But in both cases, we saw versions of ourselves that we hadn't necessarily seen before, that the artist or the filmmaker, or in the case of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry wanted to point towards a point on the horizon and give us inspiration. Star Trek, a diverse crew traveling the universe on a peaceful mission, trying to make the universe safer for all species. The first cell phone, the first MRI, the first GPS, the first interracial kiss all took place on Star Trek. And how many kids in garages across the country did that show inspire? An American Family. When the oldest son came out to his family, it was earth shattering. And by the way, everybody watched it. 1972, Maude, in a comedy, adult woman in her 40s gets an abortion. 2 years later, Roe v. Wade becomes law of the land. The ability for artists to take chances and inspire change through their content it's less present than it's ever been. We are so obsessed with true crime. We are so obsessed with the dark. Even our most popular superhero movies, the one of the main characters kills half of humanity with a snap of a finger because he doesn't believe that we can. Now, ultimately, good comes out, but these are the stories we're choosing to tell our 12-year-olds and our 6-year-olds, and we're wondering why Gen Z is the most suicidal, depressed generation in the history of mankind. So I'm asking people, I'm giving a keynote tomorrow, and the last chapter of my speech will be, can we stop greenlighting the apocalypse? Stop greenlighting desperation and start greenlighting inspiration. And I'm not looking for kumbaya and all happiness. I am looking for some sense of, hey, what if we do solve the world's problems, and what will that look like?
Evan, thank you so much for spending time with me. We could talk we could just have you on the show and just chat, which hopefully we will be able to do before too long. And I know that you've got a busy schedule this year. You're going to be at MIP TV, right?
Yeah, I'm giving the keynote there, which was a real honor to be invited to do. And I'll actually be, so the research I just talked about, I do with Publishers Clearinghouse. We're going to do another new piece of research that we're going to unveil there. And it's going to be focusing on genre and on content and on the types of stories we tell each other and why.
Okay, well, I'll put a link in the episode description to the recent report that you've just done, so everybody can go and take a look at that. But for now, looking forward to your keynote here at Realscreen. Thanks, Evan. We'll see you very soon.
Thanks so much.
So here we are on day 2 of the Realscreen Summit in Austin, Texas, and I'm here with an old friend of TellyCast, Peter White, TV editor of Deadline. How you doing, Peter?
Hello, mate. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. And you were on one of the very first podcasts, and here we are a couple of years later, seeing you in the flesh after your move to LA. How's LA treating you?
It's good. It's funny you bring that up. Yeah, I think I felt like I had my own strand on TellyCast in the first few weeks of the pandemic, having just moved to the States. It's been nearly 3 years now. It's crazy to think. Loving LA, loving the sunshine. The US television business is pretty crazy, but that makes it interesting to cover. And then here we are in Austin, Texas, which, as many people know, is one of my favorite cities in the world.
We're going to be going out and sampling a bit of the nightlife this week. Just talking about Deadline for a second then. You cover a lot of the late night shows, don't you? Amongst many other things. So what's going on at the moment at Deadline? Because awards season is a big deal, right, in the US. What's going on right now?
I guess a bit of context. So I moved in March 2020 to LA from London. And at the time, it was largely me in the UK, but that team has grown significantly since I left. We've got a bunch of people that I'm sure many of you know, Max and Jesse and Jake Cantor, as well as the film team, people like Andreas, covering the internationals beat. So Deadline's definitely gone more global. But my job then sort of became television editor in the States. So it's entirely domestic, really. I've obviously still got friends in the UK that I like to hear from, but on the whole, it's just figuring out what's going on in US telly. And we sort of have different beats. Yeah, one of the things that I focus on is late night, which is really fun. You get to speak to the likes of Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers and those types of folk. But then just covering everything from scripted, from unscripted, which is why we're here in Austin. And, trying to figure out what the gossip is. That's why they've got me there hunting down on the ground to find out what's really going on.
All right. Well, check out Deadline to see those latest news stories. So you were also here, though, to moderate 2 of the big keynote sessions this week. The first of those with Chairman and Chief Content Officer of Warner Brothers Discovery's US Networks Group, which is a bit of a mouthful, but there we are. What are the key takeaways then from that session?
Well, after I read out her job title, we had about 5 minutes left of the session to talk about shows and what was going on at WBD.
And I should say, actually, it's Kathleen Finch. I forgot to incorporate her name. We talked about her title, but that's her name. So yeah, Kathleen Finch. You were on stage with her for a good hour, and it was a really good session.
Yeah, it was. She was incredibly candid, which I think certainly surprised me, and it surprised other people. So she got this job in April last year, and it was a pretty big gig because of what was going on with the merger. And really, over the last 9 months, people have been trying to figure out, what is really going on there. It's such a big job because she essentially looks after all of the Turner networks, things like TNT and TBS, as well as all the Discovery channels that Discovery itself and TLC, as well as HGTV and Food Network, which are, really big channels, even if perhaps the perception isn't that they are. There's a lot of cancellations, a lot of restructures, a lot of layoffs. So it was a little bit of a surprise that she was speaking. And then even more of a surprise that she was actually pretty frank about the challenges, about what was been going on at the company. She was talking about how, having those hard conversations with producers when you pull their show 2 weeks before it premieres. I think producers liked the fact that she didn't shy away from that. I'm not sure they all liked her answers, not that anyone would like their shows being axed and people being made redundant. But she tried to talk through the programming needs of those networks. One of the fundamental challenges of bringing Warner Brothers and Discovery together, and this works across the group, is essentially Discovery was a lower cost business than Warner's. So, for instance, Turner Networks, will be paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million, for an episode of an unscripted show, whereas the Discovery channels, much less. People peg it between sort of $200,000 and $300,000 an hour. So trying to bring that together, trying to, while you're also trying to save money, which David Zaslav has been public about having to save billions of dollars after the merger. So I think she's got to square that circle, which is very tough. And she sort of was honest that the TNT and TBS and True TV aren't going to be commissioning quite as much as they used to. And those networks were pretty good for producers because you got a good deal. You generally got to hold on to your international rights, or certainly more so than on the Discovery channels. Whereas the Discovery model is a bit more work for hire, which she admitted is a model she likes. So she was honest about all that. We talked about a few controversial things. Dana White's new show, Power Slap, which was a bit unfortunate given that he'd been slapping his wife around, a week before the launch of that show. A hot new TLC show that's got everyone buzzing called MILF Manor, which is essentially based on a 30 Rock skit about bringing some older ladies to an island to find love. She said it's not the Learning Channel anymore. So it was a lot of fun. We talked about the content. We talked about the structure of the teams. She's fine. She said that the days of those changes are largely over, so she's got that team set. And she was, trying to say, look, let's put 2020 behind us and look ahead, which, as I said at the start, a lot of people were pretty impressed that she did, and now want to see if she's actually going to go and, spend some money on some shows.
So Discovery Channel are obviously one of the mainstay channels for Realscreen Summit, and they've always usually been here in a fairly strong presence and contingent. Possibly not so much this year as in previous years. So, they're another key buyer for international producers as well as domestic producers, of course, in the States. What are the changes? How are they likely to affect Discovery Channel then itself?
So I think she said they're going to double down on Discovery Channel. Discovery Channel is pretty Ronseal, right? It does what it says on the tin. It makes shows like Moonshiners, Street Outlaws, Deadliest Catch, and it's going to continue to keep doing that. One of the interesting things that she talked about was not really wanting agents to bring fully formed shows to Discovery. She wants producers and people to find these weird characters, whether it's, a Louisiana prawn diver or, someone who lives in the mountain, whose granny drives a bus or something like that. They, these unusual characters that they can build a show around and then hopefully in success turn it into a franchise, whether that's from Alaska or the coast or in the middle of the country. Discovery is real heartland America. So that was the big takeaway for Discovery. I'm not sure it went down entirely well with the agents who have been trying to package those shows for Kathleen and her team. And then you have all those other channels. There's a lot of smaller channels like the Science Network, which she essentially said is no longer going to be doing original programming, and there's a few of those. She talked up ID, given the success of True Crime, which, as we all know, is still buzzing. It doesn't cease to stop. So IDs are an important one for them. And TLC, which has is the female lens, but it's still those weird characters. It's still sister wives. It's still these slightly unusual folk that people like to gawk at. So on the Discovery side, that seems to be the main takeaways.
Right at the end, I noticed she mentioned Netflix and just talked about ratcheting up of prices that she felt Netflix were responsible for. Can you just expand on that as a little bit for me?
Yeah, I'm glad you spotted that. Coming right towards the end, as much as one network executive will slam another, she basically blamed Netflix, for raising the prices when they moved into Unscripted, because obviously over the last few years, they've been doing these big, shiny reality shows, whether it's Too Hot to Handle or other big dating formats. And they cost a lot of money comparatively to the types of shows that her team was making. And that skewed the competition a little bit. It obviously meant producers were more likely to try and want to get a Netflix show. There's no secret over the last few years. Everyone wants a Netflix show. You can stick it on your website, stick it on your CV, and it looks good. You can brag to your mates. But she basically said she thinks that's coming to an end. Netflix, has over the last year been a bit more cautious. They still spend a lot of money, but they're not quite as brash as maybe they were before. So she said there's a little bit more parity than there might have been. And there's others in the market. There's some Amazon people around here. They're still trying to crack the unscripted market. So there's some companies with deep pockets that Warner Bros. Discovery has to compete against. And while Warner Bros. Discovery is a huge company with a lot of money, they don't really want to spend it in those networks particularly. They don't want to spend $1 million an hour on an unscripted format.
Yeah. As you say, it was quite a candid session. And then the other big headliner slot that you moderated was with documentary legend Alex Gibney.
Yeah, I like the way you say that. It makes me sound like headlining the Reading Festival across 2 days. Alex was great. He is a wonderful documentary filmmaker. So he's being inducted into the Realscreen Hall of Fame this year. And so the conversation, we both talked about his early days, how he came through the fallow years that his wife would remind him not to tell anyone that he worked in documentary because it would prevent him getting jobs, through to, some of these award-winning documentaries that he's made. Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room, Taxi to the Dark Side.
Going Clear,
the Scientology documentary, which has, caused a lot of controversy. One of my favorites, Gonzo, a Hunter S. Thompson film that he made. So we talked about his career there, but we also talked about the general documentary market. Realscreen is a funny beast because it sits in that middle bit of both very serious nonfiction and very daft reality shows. And Alex is very much of the very serious documentaries, although he does make some music films and some sports films along the way. He was talking about how consolidation is already having a harmful effect on the budgets and on the types of shows. He was talking about the streamers and the algorithms. He said, he'd received notes from streamers in terms of how the data is used, something that he doesn't like. He was talking up some young filmmakers. He's a big producer as well as a director. He runs a company called Jigsaw Productions, which is now backed by Imagine, Brian Glazer and Ron Howard. So they've got a stake in that. So he exec produces a lot of things. So he's on the hunt for young filmmakers. And he was, pretty honest about the challenges of finding those people, of those filmmakers coming through at a time when, documentary's always been tough to fund. And it went through a really booming period over the last few years. He said he was cautiously optimistic that there's still plenty of good stuff to be made. But he did, highlight the fact that some of the challenges in documentary are the same as they've been for the last 30 years.
It was refreshing, I think, to have somebody of his stature on stage talking so freely, actually, about, the challenges working with streamers and with the other networks both from a producer perspective, but also a director perspective as well.
Oh, he's no bullshit, Alex Gibney. That guy is hard as nails. And you sort of think to the point where if people are trying to tell him what to do, you can just imagine what the rest of the documentary business is dealing with. So yeah, he was pretty forthright. He told a funny story about making a film about Henry Kissinger and Henry Kissinger being furious with it, which, as I pointed out, is him probably doing his job correctly. I think Esquire magazine called him the most important documentarian of his generation, and he's pretty good at making films. He's pretty good at producing films. He doesn't take any shit, as I said. So it's fascinating to hear and talk. What was really interesting at the end of the panel, as we were coming off the stage, there were dozens and dozens of people coming up to him, mostly just coming up to say, I love your work, what can you teach me? His reps sort of moved him away really quickly when it sort of emerged that, we're looking at 30 people here who all want a piece of Alex Gibney.
Yeah, it was like a documentarian rock star coming off the stage. But he did take a bit of a swipe on a lot of the factual programming that's based around big stars, didn't he? And when it's all about, editorial control for a big, Hollywood name-fronted documentary series.
Yeah, we've seen that over the last years, and I'm sure a few people listening might know my predilection for music documentaries. And you're sort of getting to that point now where a lot of these stars are exec producing their own series. So it does make you wonder whether you're getting the full story or the whole truth. And they're just not as good as the films, some of my favorites, whether it's Don't Look Back or Gimme Shelter or something where the star didn't have control. There was, a few years ago, Michael Jordan controversially had an EP credit on The Last Dance. not that it was an incredible film, but you just do worry sometimes. He was pointing out, you do worry sometimes that if someone has the control of the narrative, can you really make a great documentary? And I think there's a bit of concern that as Hollywood keeps chasing, they want bigger and bigger stars in the documentary space, these stars have a bit of control. They all own their own production companies, so they all want to be involved in that. And will it distill or will it water down the quality of the show? So he was a little bit worried about that. But, I think as he pointed out, if he made a Lance Armstrong film and he said Lance was trying to craft the narrative even without an EP credit. So you kind of just, if you're a good documentary filmmaker, you kind of just have to try and figure it out and get past that.
Yeah, and he was just talking about the truth, wasn't he? Getting to the truth. And the Lance Armstrong film he talked about, as a result of him not having editorial control, obviously the revelations that came out during the filming and after the filming turned it into a very, very different film than he'd set out to make.
Yeah, I don't think it was the film that Alex started with, but it was probably a better film for it. And then, he talked about doing a Boris Becker film towards the end. He's doing that for Apple. And it was interesting because Boris Becker probably could have done the thing where he EPs his own film, which just points out how amazing he was at tennis. But, we all know that he's had a few challenges. Alex said he interviewed him just literally days before he went to jail. He had the famous romp in the closet that I'm sure many people remember. And he did say that Boris was pretty open about all of that. I guess for some people who agree to do this, you do want the whole story, even if it is tough sometimes. So that was fun. It does sound like quite a good film, that one. So we'll see. I think he said it was basically done in 2 parts. So we'll enjoy that when it comes out.
Yeah. Look out for that. Peter, thanks so much for joining me. Great to chat to you. And let's get ourselves out for some barbecue and line dancing later on.
I'm going to see you down the honky tonk, Justin.
Thanks a lot, Pete. So my next guest on this week's TellyCast special from Realscreen Summit is Marc Kamler, partner, head of unscripted content at A3 Artists Agency. Marc, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Justin. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on and have a little chat. What I think is really interesting is the way that agents work in the US, because it's a very different model to how producers sell their shows to networks, and the US is very different to lots of other markets. So we'll come on to chat about that in a second. But first of all, tell us about A3 and who you represent.
So A3 Artists is an agency based in Los Angeles and New York. We represent everybody that one could represent in media: television writers, actors, film, voiceover, sports personalities. Probably have the largest roster of digital content and influencers in the business, and a really prolific unscripted department, which I am part of and I run. I represent predominantly production companies, largely based in the States and the UK, and we're just trying to figure out navigating this crazy market like everybody else.
Yeah, well, that's right. And it's at a time of intense change. And again, we'll maybe touch on that a little later. So in terms of producers, let's focus on producers and unscripted producers. Now, you represent a good, really strong contingent of UK indies, focusing on the unscripted market. And I've just seen you've just announced you're working with Kate Beale from Woodcut Media, so congratulations on that.
She's wonderful.
Can you explain, for anybody who doesn't know, how an agent works with a UK producer or a producer from another international market in the US? Why is the system different, and what an agent does?
I think UK producers are such a great piece of our industry. They've always made such a concerted effort to make great television. And I think with the popularity of documentaries, with the popularity of factual television, the marketplace has changed, and I think the marketplace has turned an eye to UK producers, and I have as well, because they are telling the stories that globally people want to hear. I feel like an agent's job is to understand the marketplace. The UK producers are based in the UK. They're not in the States day to day. They need real-time market intelligence. They need to understand what the networks are thinking, how things are changing, and when they are changing immediately so they can best adapt. If you're waiting to see a show that premieres on television, well, that show is probably bought a few years earlier and you're following the wrong trend. I think an agency becomes, it's a military term, a force multiplier, but it just does more things for the production company than they can do themselves to grow their business any way they know how.
Okay, and so it's your role is really to stay close to the commissioners, understand what they're looking for, and presumably get the best possible price for productions that your clients are proposing.
Yeah, look, agents we know how to make these deals. We've made these deals. We know what the precedents are. We know what we can and can't do at a given network. We know what leverage we have or that we don't have in a given situation. And yeah, we're talking on a regular basis to these commissioners to understand what it is that they want to buy. A lot of the times that they don't truly know. There have not been a lot of breakout hits in Unscripted in the past couple of years, and I think people are waiting for the next big thing. There's been a turn towards transactional shows. There's been a look at dating shows and social experiment shows. But really, what is next? And that's what our clients and the agents at my company constantly speak about, because you want to think about what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now when, that show actually pops versus when it just becomes an idea on a piece of paper.
Right, okay. We talked earlier on in the show to Peter White about Kathleen Finch and what she was talking about with Warner Brothers Discovery and their unscripted strategy. And obviously, huge amount of change there, huge amount of impact in terms of less programming in 2022 being commissioned. What do you think the outlook is for 2023 for Unscripted with the US networks?
I'm cautiously optimistic about Unscripted in 2023. There wasn't a lot of new series commissioned by anybody in 2022. There were merges, there were stock drops, there were reevaluations almost of the entire marketplace. But all of these streamers, all of these cable networks, all of the broadcast networks will need content, and they need a continual flow of content. And they'll need to get it on the air quickly. So Kathleen talked about 4,500 hours of original programming. How could you not be optimistic about that? I hope that's only the beginning, and hopefully the other networks and platforms will start buying with the impending writer's strike looming. That could be an additional value add to the unscripted business in particular. I think it's bright. I think, if you were able to survive what happened in 2022, I think 23 looks to be a very good year.
As a result of all those changes and the mergers and layoffs, there's been obviously a lot of executive layoffs on the commissioning side. Does that mean that, you're hard at work building those new relationships with new commissioners that are in place, or you're focusing presumably on understanding who are the key decision makers and what they want individually for, specific channels?
I think you're always going to look at the major streamers, the major conglomerates because they will have the most money to buy the most content. But I think we all need to be paying attention to what is the next outlet. Roku wasn't the thing a couple of years ago for original content. Samsung has come into the fold. There will continually be new places to look at what is going to happen in the world of digital, what platform is going to pop up, and how will content survive there. Content's such an interesting thing where it's not going to be a 22-minute show or a 44-minute show anymore. It might be a longer show. It might be a shorter show. But there's always going to be a desire for content. People are always going to want to consume good content. So you always need to be paying attention to what's next, or you're not going to be part of the future. It's going to pass you by.
So how about you at A3 then, in terms of looking for new clients, looking for new producer clients? Are you actively looking to represent more UK producers and producers from all around the world who are not in the US market?
I'm looking to represent producers who tell the best stories. If they're based in the UK, that's fantastic. If they're based in Istanbul, fantastic, or Canada or the US. I don't think the geographic location matters as much as an ability to really tell a great story and be able to understand at the same time the US audience. I've met a lot of great storytellers who know how to tell a story for their particular region, but haven't fully understood the intricacies of the US market. Some are open to it and will develop and understand and thrive in this business, and some don't, and they're not the people that are making a lot of television or content in the U.S. market, but it's not geographically based.
Okay, so what's the ideal profile of a producer that will make you want to represent them? What is do they have to have a certain number of hours under their belts, or what's the profile?
I want to be inspired. I mean, it may sound cliche, but I consume a ton of content. I love to be taken on a journey. I love to be a part of. That's why I got into this business altogether. There's a producer out of the UK, Curious Films. They just did this documentary on John McAfee. Blew my mind. And these are people I need to work with. They told a fabulous story, and they're really interested in segueing into television, and now we're working on a couple of really cool projects together. And all of their work is bespoke and interesting and unique, and I can really get behind that. They don't have any series on the air. And so when you ask what's a client that I would typically look for, normally it would be a client with a lot of series on the air, but they just had such great stories to tell, and he's having such incredible success. That's what I need. A combination of that and producers with a bunch of series on the air.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you're led by the content often.
Yeah, I have to be. If I'm not inspired, I'm not the right agent for you. There's a lot of agents in our business. There's a lot of agencies, and we can't represent everybody. And so, yeah, if your agent isn't inspired by your work, they're probably not doing the best job that they could.
So we're talking about lots of change at the moment in the market, and we're talking about levels of commissioning. You said you're optimistic for this year. What about rights positions? Because that's often been a bone of contention for UK producers, wanting to retain international rights. Do you see rights positions changing this year? And if so, how?
I think it's possible. As the budgets for these networks come down, they're going to want to expect a certain type of quality to still be on the screen. And in many cases, they cannot pay for 100% of the show that they want to put on the air. And so I think groups that have not traditionally been open to it in a long time, or have been open to it on some of the smaller fringe channels, might be open to it. And I'm hopeful that they're open to it, because there's really creative deals that can be made in a co-production model with Canadian producers and the UK producers. So I'm hopeful, but time will only tell on that, and that's ultimately going to depend on the business affairs and money people on the other side.
So finally, Marc, what about tips for producers? How should they be presenting themselves to buyers and commissioners at US networks?
I think bring the passion. I find that I hear from a lot of my buyer friends that, especially the UK producers, are very modest in their approach. They don't like the sales aspect. They don't. And I know these producers are so passionate, and you're selling, you're bringing your energy and the passion, and you want to get them, you want it to be infectious, and you want them to want to work with you. You want them to believe in your content, because they're going to have to go into a room and they're going to have to sell you, and they're going to be selling you as much as the content that you're showing. So bring it and be passionate and love what you're selling. And I think that's probably the best the best advice I could give.
Fantastic. Marc, thank you so much for joining me on TellyCast this week. It's been fascinating chatting with you, and good luck with the rest of the summit.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
So my final guest this week is a veteran of the unscripted space, Rachel Jobe, SVP, non-scripted content at All3 Media International. Rachel, nice to see you.
Hello, Justin. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you out there doing lots of meetings all the way through this summit. Obviously, you're pretty busy. What are the main projects that you're pitching to channels and buyers, and what sort of deals are you looking to do at the market?
Okay, well, we're pitching obviously a lot of titles. We've got a big deep catalogue, but we are focusing a lot on our premium factual slate. But that's now about, say, 20 to 25 titles. I'd say about half of them have delivered. So what's really good is we can talk about some projects that are absolutely available to watch and screen. Some of them have obviously been pre-bought because that's the premium factual world. There's a lot of that goes on, but there's still plenty still available. I mean, a really good project is called The Real Crown. That's for ITV and it's produced by the amazing 72 Films. It's just delivering now, so it's brilliant. It'll air, I can't reveal the TX date, but it's airing later this year. And obviously it's very timely with everything that's going on with the royal family and the Netflix series as well. So that's getting a lot of interest. We're also pitching a project called Spacey Unmasked, which is completely opposite end of the spectrum. It's pretty dark. It's about Kevin Spacey, and it's a follow-on from a project we did last year with Roast Beef Productions on Ghislaine Maxwell. And this is them doing what they do best, is sort of getting amazing access. Dorothy Byrne, who's the EP, she was EP on Leaving Neverland. She gets people to talk about really difficult things very eloquently. And this is a similar project. And unfortunately, it very much appears like Kevin Spacey was a sexual predator, and he will be on trial in London next June. So this project will take us to that process. It's actually been commissioned by Channel 4, and we're currently in the business of sort of pre-selling it now.
A little bit about your role at All3 Media International then, because obviously you were once a commissioner in a previous life, a few years ago. How does that experience equip you for your current role? And talk us through your current role.
I love my job because actually I feel like I get the best of both worlds. So one of the reasons why I came into All3 was, we have a brilliant factual slate and we have a lot of companies within our group that make amazing factual programs. But I think they felt there was a slight gap in terms of that editorial nous and a little bit of sort of sensibility and being able to genuinely engage with our producers, at an editorial level around factual shows. So when I came in, it's really good that I could have those conversations. And I'm not like across everything, I'm not execing stuff, but at least we can have a really meaty conversation and actually was able to sort of find projects that perhaps weren't very obviously something that we might get involved with or we could fund. And again, bring in some co-pro or pre-sale partners. So I work very closely with our own companies, but I'm scouting around. We work with third-party companies. I've just mentioned 72 Films and Roast Beef. They're not in the All3 Media group, for example, so we do work with other companies as well. So I'm definitely sometimes I feel like an account manager and sometimes I feel like I want to be exec producer, but it's a really nice mix of sort of commercial and creativity in my role.
Talking about the companies under the All3 banner then, the production companies, you're acting as a bit of a sounding board? Is that how you say? I mean, how early do you get involved in projects? Quite
early, actually. I mean, some companies have a huge slate, and so, I don't know every single title on their slate, but I certainly will know a few of them. We have regular catch-ups, we have monthly catch-ups with everybody, and generally people will highlight projects that they feel are about to be commissioned or they've got a good chance with, or sometimes they're just genuinely really excited about it and they think it will fly, and so they're asking me, what do you think, there's any opportunity for international, is there an opportunity to bring in a partner, which is increasingly the question that I get. So it's really good that we have that dialogue, and that happens also with the companies we have first looks with, or there are some companies that we just have very, very strong relationships with, and I think that is sort of part of being part of the All3 family and the sort of juggernaut that we are. You do get the benefits of that, but it still feels like we're small enough to be really close and have really, really lovely conversations. So you're not in sales, essentially. You're not, you're not, but you're working alongside. So we've got Jennifer Askin here as well, one of your colleagues. So she's much more involved on the sales side. Is that right? And you're essentially repping the catalogue
alongside Jennifer. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Yeah, Jen is absolutely front and centre sales, and actually she's based in New York, so it's really great just to be here with a colleague that you don't actually see that often. You see them in a box on Zoom. But I'm joining her for, I'd say, probably half of her meetings, particularly where she's pitching the projects that are earlier in development. I mean, she's very good at pitching, and I've obviously seen her pitch a lot this week, but I think for her it's really helpful to have me there, particularly with a new project, because she might not be as familiar with it, or she might not have had a conversation with the producer 2 days ago and know the very latest updates. So that's just a really nice way to sort of double hand pitch, and it's also really great for me to sort of see first-hand feedback from the buyers as well, and what they're interested in, because what has happened here, and it always happens actually, someone will say, actually, I'm really interested in doing something along these lines, and I'll say, actually, there's a project, Jen, that you don't know about, but I'm going to mention it now because it just, so it is very useful for me to be involved in some of those meetings.
We're talking about Premium Factual, which is very much the sort of bullseye project that you're involved in. We're seeing, a lot of turbulence in the market. We've spoken to all of the other guests in the show about that turbulence. We saw Warner Bros. Discovery pretty much putting the brakes on all of their commissioners last year, for example, and there's some optimism, I think, out there in terms of how things are going to pan out this year, but what are the implications for the premium factual end of the market with this uncertainty, all of these mergers and acquisitions, and I think we could probably bet there's going to be more of those, in the year ahead. Does the premium factual end of the market suffer from that, or is it more budget factual titles, or is it the ones that are in the middle ground that suffer more? In your experience, and what would you be expecting the premium factual market to change this year?
I think that's a really good question, and I've heard sort of people talking about that already whilst I've been here, and I think Premium Factual is really well placed. I think we're going to hear the word co-production a lot, I think, now going forward over the next couple of years, and we tend to when there's a sort of bit of an economic downturn and budgets get tighter, and Premium Factual lends itself so well to co-production in a way that something like a format or lifestyle makes co-productions a lot harder, whereas the Premium Factual space, a lot of the stories are often quite global and international anyway. That you're telling a story usually by a person, and then usually they're the only person that can tell that story. So, it works for everybody. And maybe there's a bit of tweaking that needs to be done. Maybe there's a slightly different version. Our Ghislaine Maxwell series was a Channel 4. We brought in Stars as a co-production partner. That worked very well. Ghislaine Maxwell is British. She committed her crimes in the US. And there are millions of projects that are sort of similar that will resonate. So I think you'll see a lot of co-production. I think your point about the stuff in the middle, that tends to suffer a little bit. Maybe we'll see less projects, but bigger projects. I don't know. I think what we are seeing, though, is people coming to the market saying we're really interested in co-production, and they haven't been doing co-productions before. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
In your role, knowing that co-production is going to become more and more important, does that change the way that projects are developed, or is just that, does that have an impact on the shows that you're taking to market, or is it just a case of the shows are the shows, the content is the content, and how you fund it, that conversation starts once you're willing to take it out to people?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I mean, it always has to start with a good idea, and I think you start with a good idea, and I do get producers that come to me saying, oh, this is a co-production project, but what they really mean is it's expensive, and that's not necessarily, it lends itself, it's still the idea has to work in a co-production model. I think I am going to be looking at that a lot more and looking for opportunities. What we often do is, if there is a deficit or if there is a gap, we will potentially fund the whole thing ourselves and then go out and find a partner. Or we might fund some of it and say, well, actually, we think you can make the show for X budget, which is probably not what you wanted, but it's doable. And if the producer agrees, it might happen. But in the meantime, you crack on, you can start pre-production. We'll go and look for a co-pro partner. So there's different ways to sort of skin the cat, actually. But I think what we don't want to do is just take on loads and loads and loads of projects for co-production, because that's not going to work. You have to be really selective.
When we're coming to talk about Premium Factual, I've seen some articles where you've spoken about this as being cost conscious still. It has to be premium, but equally it has to be cost conscious. And one of the ways you've suggested that is a focus for you is archive and the use of archive. Can you expand on that a little bit in terms of using archive to perhaps reduce costs or change the nature of a show or the content of the show How does that work? Because we've actually never spoken about archive on TellyCast, and I think it's a really interesting subject that could do, with delving into a little bit.
Years ago, when I was a commissioner at History Channel, I used to say, please don't bring me archive shows, because we were all about sort of present tense and actuality, and archive just felt like the things that we used to do in the past, that sort of World War II stuff. So I was always really kind of a downer on archive, and I got this sort of reputation for it. But whereas now I love archive, and I think archive has had a renaissance, and I don't even think it's a cost thing. To be honest, archive can often be quite expensive as well, particularly if you just sort of pick the very best. I think what's really important that archive is never used as wallpaper. I think I mentioned 72 Films, they make a lot of shows with archive, and they do it very, very well. Their archive researcher is one of the most important people in the crew, which isn't necessary on other docs, and it often starts with they go out there looking for amazing pieces of archive, and then they find the people who can talk to that piece of archive. The archive is the star, and I think that's when archive is used really well. And it's a real sort of interest now in sort of contemporary history, where we know there's a lot of archive around. So I think anything sort of 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s now, you can use archive really cleverly, and it can really help you drive the story forward. I mean, it can be cost effective, but I think also it's great when archive, you don't worry about the cost and you make the greatest show, but then, cost always comes into it.
So if you were to give one prediction for the year ahead when it comes to the premium factual sector, what's your key pointer for this sector over the next year?
Can I make two?
Yeah, of course.
I think there's a negative one and a positive one. I think the negative one is that a lot of things will be called premium when they're not, and I think we're seeing that already. So I think it's sort of slightly damaging the genre. I know it's a bit sniffy, but it's slightly, and I think just calling it premium doesn't make it premium, which I sometimes say quite a lot as well.
Well, what does make a project premium then?
That's a good question. I've got a whole PowerPoint I can send you actually, because I had to internally. I was like, okay, everybody, this is what premium is. I mean, there's a book. I've got literally a bullet point list, and I think you want to be ticking most of them. But it's things. I mean, budget obviously is part of it, but in order to deliver the premium elements, it is expensive. So, and simple things like it will almost certainly have a very sexy title sequence, but it's the kind of thing that you might have seen on a scripted show. And actually, a lot of things in premium factual have been borrowed from scripted. So the contributors will often be speaking about first-person testimony. They won't be expert-led as much. Archive won't be used as wallpaper. It will have a slightly journalistic, investigative feel. It will have, a lot of integrity. It will feel like there's a purpose. It absolutely needs to be something we haven't heard, seen, or done before. So when needs to be speaking the first time, we need to see some new evidence. Kind of think what else is on the list. It's not exhaustive, but I think there are things that do need to sort of signify to the audience that it's premium. And I think just making a series that is no different to something that might have been made 5 years ago and calling it premium, it just isn't. So I think we have to protect the genre, and I think I'm worried that we were not. My other point was more around, I think we may see a slight move into other subject matters. So premium factual has been dominated by crime, a little bit of sports, a little bit of contemporary history, but I'm really pleased and excited to see what other subject matters will get the sort of premium treatment. I've seen a bit in the paranormal space, but I think it'd be nice to see what other areas.
I think there'll be premium factual will be present in more genres and perhaps that haven't been, we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are developing. I've seen people developing more ideas in that space. I don't think it's easy necessarily, but I think that's the way the genre will probably move.
Rachel, I'm going to let you go because I know you're pretty much back-to-back meetings. So thanks for taking the time. Great to see you, and good luck with the rest of the summit.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's about it from the Realscreen Summit. This week's show was recorded in Austin, Texas, and edited by Ian Chambers. Until next week, stay safe. Are you tired of the same old streaming options? Introducing Myco, the revolutionary Web3 content platform where you can not only watch films, TV shows, user-generated content, live events, and listen to podcasts, but earn from them too.
Myco commissions and produces content that connects and empowers both viewers and creators in a fully decentralized video ecosystem. With live monetization, crowdfunding, NFT gating, and even the opportunity for fractional ownership of content, Myco is changing the game. Myco. Join the conversation and start earning today. Download the app from the Apple and Google Play app stores.